It has been well said that Buddhism is Hinduism stripped for export. You see, Hinduism is a way of life that goes far, far beyond what we in the West call religion. It involves cookery, everyday family life, house building, just everything. It's the whole Hindu way of life, and so you can't export it. It belongs to the soil and the culture, but there are essential elements in it that can be transmitted outside the culture of India, and Buddhism was one of the ways of doing just that. So let's sum up what Buddhism is about. The word Buddha is derived from the root Bud in Sanskrit, Bud, which means to be awake. So the Buddha is the awakened man, the man who woke up. What does he wake up from? Obviously a dream. And what kind of a dream is this? Well, I would call it a state of hypnosis. This is called in Sanskrit avidya, A-V-I-D-Y-A. Vidya is knowledge in Sanskrit, and it is the root from which we get videre in Latin, to see, and vision in English. So putting the A in front of it means none, or not seeing. Ignorance, where you see but you ignore everything that you're not looking at. As we began to imagine that we were separate individuals, what is called in Buddhism the view of separateness, a Buddha is one who has overcome that. He is awakened from that illusion, from that state of hypnosis. He knows that, well, I can't put what he knows in any positive terms. This is the special thing about Buddhism. Everything in Buddhism sounds negative. Let's put it this way. Let's suppose you engage yourself in a relationship with the Buddha or with one. I mean, there are hundreds of Buddhas. One we call Gautama is just the historical Buddha that everybody knows about. But one Buddha leads to another because, as a result of his relationships with people, he turns them into Buddhas too, awakened people. Now, you meet one of these people and he's going to give you a rough time. One of the Buddhas running around these days is Krishnamurti. Krishnamurti absolutely destroys everybody's religion. He asks, why do you believe this? Why are you hanging on to that? Why do you want to insist that this idea is so? He shows you that all your fixed formulations, all the ideas to which you cling, are spurious. And then you suddenly get into a kind of vertigo, dizziness, that you feel as though you're no longer standing on firm ground, but that the universe has suddenly turned into water, or worse, air, or worse still, empty space. There's nothing to hold on to now. You see, often when one discusses religion with people, they say, well, I need a religion because I need something to hold on to. Well, that's the way not to use a religion, because if you use religion as something to hold on to, your religion is an expression of unfaith. Faith is where you let go, not where you hold on. When the cat falls off the tree, the cat relaxes, you see, and so the cat lands with a soft thud and doesn't get hurt because the cat has faith. But if the cat would suddenly grab itself with all 4 feet and tighten up, it would be hurt. So, the method of Buddhism, it's called the Dharma, doesn't mean the law, it means the method. The method is to knock the stuffing out of you, to take away everything to which you cling, to cleanse you completely of all beliefs, all ideas, all concepts of what life is about, so that you completely let go. Buddhism has no doctrines at all that you have to believe in. I don't care what background you come from, whether you're a Roman Catholic or a logical positivist, both are clinging to something, you see. And so the method of Buddhism is to knock out the underpinnings and say, well, not only do we not believe in anything, we don't even believe in not believing in anything. And to go through this is pretty rough because you can do it on what seems at first to be a merely intellectual level. So you can engage a group of people in discussion, and you can start, whenever they propose an idea that is their sort of guiding principle of life, you demolish it, show that it doesn't hold water, and step by step, you unearth by talking with them what the fundamental ideas they're operating on are. Everybody is a philosopher. Everybody has metaphysics. Although they may not know what it is, they've never examined it. But by this method, you bring it out and you demolish it. And this, suddenly, what seemed like a very nice intellectual discussion, turns into sheer murder. People get really anxious. They develop all the trembles and the symptoms of extreme anxiety. And so they finally say to the guru, the teacher, well, heaven's sakes, what do you believe in? He says, I'm not proposing anything. I didn't set anything up. Well, how do you navigate? How do you exist? This is the problem. Because you see, what we're moving from, as I suggested a moment ago, we're moving from a state of affairs where we're accustomed to navigation on land to a state of affairs where we're in the water. And this is very critical for today because the impact of modern science on Western culture has been very similar to this. In Christianity, for example, we sing hymns like How Firm a Foundation and Rock of Ages, Ein fester Burg, Our mighty fortress is our God. We have something to stand on. The Church's one foundation is Jesus Christ, her Lord. You know, it's this firm thing, all right? Suddenly all that disappears or becomes implausible, and we find ourselves swimming or sinking. Now, when you find that you're living in the midst of the universe of relativity, well, there's nothing you can hold on to. You've got to learn how to swim. And to swim, you've got to relax and stop grabbing. So, this is what Buddhism does when it says, it's the art of letting go of non-attachment. Non-attachment doesn't mean that you lose your appetite for dinner. It means simply that you stop grabbing. You get rid of stickiness. Like a lot of people, when you tell them to relax, they become like a limp rag. It's not relaxing. Relaxing is having still tone, but it's a certain middle way. So this is what Buddhism is about, learning. For example, if I may put it in a vivid way, when you were born, you were kicked off a cliff, and there's nothing that can stop you falling. And although there are a lot of rocks falling with you, with trees growing on them, and all sorts of things like that, you can cling to one of those rocks if you like as it goes down with you for safety. But it's not safe. Nothing is safe, everything is falling apart, everything is in a state of change. There's no way of stopping it. And when you are really resigned to that, and when you really accept that, then there's nothing left to be afraid of. And when there's nothing left to be afraid of, and you've given everything up, and you know that, even, you know, a lot of people in religion cling to suffering because they know they are right as long as they hurt. Oh, I bless the good Lord for my boils, for my mental and bodily pains, and without them, I'm doomed to hell's near-ending flames. You know, a lot of people know that they're right so long as they suffer, but that's an illusion too. Even suffering offers no security. Even suicide offers no security. In Buddhism, you see, there is no security at all. You simply have to face this fact that everything is in flux and go with it. And so, the question then is simply how to convince people of this. If anybody wants to be convinced, you know, it's not the sort of thing you shove down people's throats. You don't convert them to this because if they don't want to be converted, they won't let go. So Buddhism therefore involves a very special relationship between the questioner and the person to whom the question is addressed, the pupil and the teacher. And now, Buddhism came to China as early as 60 AD, but didn't at that time make a very great impression. It was not until about the year 400 that a very great Sanskrit scholar by the name of Kumarajiva came and started teaching Chinese scholars Sanskrit, and they worked with him to translate Sanskrit into Chinese. They translated the Buddhist scriptures. They didn't, of course, do them all at that time, because the Buddhist scriptures occupy about as much space as the Encyclopedia Britannica, in fact, a little more. The Indians are great talkers. Well, anyway, they found that when they translated this into Chinese, they had to find equivalent Chinese words for the Sanskrit ideas. They found these from Taoist philosophy. Well, slowly then, Indian attitudes began to be modified by Chinese attitudes because the Chinese read into these translations Taoist meanings, so things got a little altered. Now, here came the alteration that is crucial. First of all, Chinese life is full of humor. The greatest philosopher of China, Chuang-Tzu, is the only philosopher who I think in the whole world is profoundly humorous. There's a book in the modern library called The Wisdom of Lao Tzu, and it includes huge sections of Chuang-Tzu. This is absolutely fascinating because of the humor of it. Indian Buddhism had very little humor, some yes, but very little. Next, it was all tied up with celibacy, which to the Chinese was absolutely incomprehensible because Chinese civilization is rigged around the family to a far greater extent than ours is, which is saying something, and they just couldn't see any point or any wisdom in celibacy. When Buddhism came to China, it still retained a certain element of celibacy, but for different reasons than in Hinduism. The Chinese way of celibacy is not that sex is naughty, but it's terribly convenient not to have a wife. In other words, the ideal of the uninvolved life has a certain appeal, But they could never get through their heads the notion that sexual desire was bad, which has always played a fairly strong role in Hindu thinking, not in the same way as it has in the West. The Hindus don't have a guilt take on it, but they think that it dissipates your spiritual energies. In yoga, they envisage the idea that at the base of the spine, there is what is called the kundalini, the serpent power, or the force of psychic energy. And so long as it remains at the base of the spine, this force is dissipated in sexuality. Now yoga is to suck this thing up the spine and get it into the head, and so then you withdraw from the manifestation of this energy or the dissipation of it in sexuality, and it's put on a higher level. Only which end is up, you can do it the other way too. They have what's called the right-hand way of doing it and the left-hand way of doing it. I'm not going to go into that now. The Chinese didn't see it that way. They couldn't see that it was a dissipation of energy. So what they wanted to aim at was a way of living Buddhism and being awake, but at the same time remaining active in the ordinary life of the world. It's what's called in their phraseology being king on the outside and the sage on the inside, managing practical affairs completely involved in whatever life is, but at the same time inwardly living on top of the mountain, being cloud-hidden, whereabouts unknown. So, Chinese Zen is the preeminent expression of this because it is the mixture of Indian Buddhism and Chinese Taoism, plus a certain Confucian practicality. Zen developed out of the work of Kumarajiva when it came into China. As I mentioned, around 400 AD or a little before, there were two disciples who began to work on Buddhism from a Taoist point of view, and they were actually the originators of Zen. Then apparently shortly before 500 AD, another Indian arrived in China whose name was Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma was the person who initiated Zen as a specific movement. Bodhidharma had a pupil named Ika. In Chinese, the Japanese pronunciation of Zen is the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese word Ch'an. And the story goes that when Ika came to Bodhidharma, Bodhidharma refused to accept him as a student. All Zen masters do this. They reject you, which stimulates you to come back stronger if you are going to learn at all. Ika came back stronger and stronger, and Bodhidharma resisted him more and more. Finally, Ika cut off his left arm and presented it to Bodhidharma, saying, "Look, here's my left arm, given to you as a token that nothing in the world matters to me except finding out what you're all about." Bodhidharma asked, "What do you want to know?" Ika replied, "I have no peace of mind, please pacify my mind." In Chinese, mind is pronounced Jin, and Jin is the heart mind, the psychic center. Bodhidharma said, "Bring out your Jin here before me, and I will pacify it." Ika said, "When I look for it, I can't find it." Bodhidharma replied, "Then it's pacified." Ika immediately understood what it was all about. That's the experience called Satori in Japanese, Wu in Mandarin, and in Cantonese dialect it is just what we call in modern psychological jargon the aha phenomenon. The aha phenomenon. Now I see. To us that sounds extremely weird, even immoral. We don't expect religious people to do things like that if they are self-righteous and lack humor. But these people didn't go around pretending to be especially good. They didn't dupe themselves. They understood human nature. In every one of us there is an element of irreducible rascality. In Jewish theology, this is called the Yetzer Hara, Yezerhara. The Yetzer Hara is an element of irreducible rascality, which was created by God because God has one too. That's why when you are really affectionate with someone else, men, for example, say to someone they are very fond of, "You old bastard," there's a certain glint of recognition. There's a Zen poem which says, when two Zen masters meet each other on the road, they need no introduction. When a thief meets a thief, they recognize each other instantly. This reflects the Chinese philosophy that human nature is fundamentally good, and even the rascally elements are good. They are like the salt in the human stew. Human passions, natural contentiousness, and greed are essential elements in our makeup. When people lose sight of that, they go mad. Nothing, for example, is more dangerous than a saint, an unconscious saint who thinks he is right and endeavors to live an absolutely pure life, eliminating all selfish thoughts. Such a person is a menace to all around because they lose their humor and real humility. They forget that as humans we have certain needs. We need to eat, we need sex, and so forth. This has a quality of humor to it. That's why, in Zen art, sages are often depicted to look a bit like bums, putai or hote, the laughing Buddha, the fat Buddha, with an immense belly, carrying an enormous bag of rubbish into which he puts anything he finds around and then gives it away to children. This type, the old rogue, is greatly admired. He is the non-violent brigade, the rolling stone, the free man, or in our words, the joker. The joker is the card that can play any role in the pack. Zen developed in China after Bodhidharma's time and reached a sort of golden age in the Tang and Song dynasties. The golden age of Zen lies between 713 AD and approximately 1100 to 1200 AD. That's the great creative period during which all the marvelous masters emerged and which had a profound influence on the development of Chinese poetry, painting, calligraphy, and scholarship. Then, between 1100 and 1200, it shifted to Japan and underwent a new development, rather different in quality and tone. After that, for some curious reason, which is a very complicated historical question, it slowly faded away in China, so that, as we find it today, it is principally a Japanese phenomenon and is slowly fading in Japan while slowly growing in the West. It's a very curious thing. Now let me indicate what Zen training is and how it works. I mentioned before that what is involved is a dialogue, an interchange between two people. One who has defined themselves as a student and therefore defined the other as the teacher. There is no teacher until a student arrives. No problem until a question is raised. Students create teachers. If you ask a question, you get 30 blows with a stick. If you don't ask a question, you get 30 blows with a stick because you have put yourself in a statue. You've defined yourself as having a problem. Now, nobody really has a problem, but the Maya, the game of life, is to pretend that you do. Going back to fundamental Hinduism, the Godhead or the Self pretends to be all of us and so gets lost and has a ball dreaming all this going on. When you are on your way out from the dream, it suddenly occurs to you that you have a problem. Life is suffering, but you were never really bound by it.